This is my Leica M4-2 that I picked up at the start of summer. I've spent all summer shooting pretty much exclusively with this camera, and in this video I want to talk about why I bought it, share my experience with it, share a ton of photos, and tell you why I think it's very quickly becoming my favorite camera that I've ever owned. I've had a pretty interesting past with 35mm cameras, specifically in like the last 3 years. My luck has not been very good. I think I started with a Voigtlander Bessa R a long time ago, and that camera ended up breaking, having shutter issues, so I bought another one, another Bessa R. I really liked shooting with that camera. It was light, it was more affordable than the Leica, but unfortunately the second one that I bought also broke, and I thought, okay, I'm having terrible luck. I'm going to buy a third Bessa T and give it one more shot. And unfortunately, once again, it was a similar story. So a little over a year ago, I picked up a Leica CL, or a Leitz Minolta CL, which is a Leica that's co-developed between Leica and Minolta. Some people say it's a Minolta, it's not a Leica, and some people say it's a Leica. Doesn't really matter. Great camera, except in like the first 20 days that I had it, I started having issues with that camera as well. The slower shutter speeds weren't working right, and the bulb mode, which is something I use extremely frequently for long exposures, would just stick. And it would never release unless you press the shutter like 50 times. I paid full price for that camera on eBay, so I ended up just returning that camera to the seller. And then a month later, came across this Leica CL, which I used for a very long time. This camera was gifted to me by Gene Yoon, and then I had it sent out to Red Dot Repairs, and he did a ton of work on this camera, and it shows because this has been the first reliable 35mm camera that I've owned for a very long time. I put a ton of rolls through this. I made a video called My First Time Trying Street Photography with this camera, and this camera really made me fall in love with 35mm again. Great shutter, really nice to use, nice and compact. But I started using this camera so much that I feel like its slightly more casual nature made me want to upgrade to a Leica M camera. I've never owned a Leica M camera in the 8 years or something that I've been shooting 35mm film. I've tried them out here and there. I've made a couple videos with them in the past, but I've never actually bought one myself, mainly because of the price. They're incredibly expensive. Looking back at it, I wish that 6-7 years ago when I was getting into it that I bought an M6 because they were still cheap. But I picked up a Leica M4, and I did this mainly because I felt that I was shooting enough 35mm that it would be worthwhile spending this kind of money on a camera purely for the experience. I put the same lens that was on the Leica CL onto this camera because the Leica CL is also an M mount. That means that essentially the images are going to look the same, but the experience that I've had with this camera has been so much more enjoyable than the Leica CL. I spent the summer on the East Coast putting about 100 rolls through this M4-2, which you'll see more of in some upcoming videos that I'm really excited to share. But I can truly say that I have fallen in love with this camera. This is my favorite camera I've ever owned. The shooting experience, the way you load it, the viewfinder, everything about it just feels incredible. It's hard to describe. It's so mechanical, such a joy to use. It feels really nice in the hand. Is it a necessity? I don't think so, but for a camera that I'm putting 100 rolls through, it is really, really enjoyable to use. I was getting a little bit tired of this separated viewfinder situation because I like shooting 35mm focal length, but the viewfinder on the actual Leica CL is 40mm. It's not a huge difference, but it still was enough for me to feel like I needed that external finder. Now, the M4 has 35mm frame lines, which has been fantastic. I really like looking through the actual viewfinder with the rangefinder patch in the middle. It just makes focusing that much easier, especially in kind of a street photography scenario where sometimes you want a critical focus. It's a lot easier to take a photo quickly while critically focusing with the viewfinder and rangefinder built into one. There were also just some little quirks with this camera that kind of annoyed me. One of the main ones being that if you shoot on a tripod a lot, like I do, you have to remove the tripod plate every single time you want to reload this camera, which is just ridiculous. You have to actually physically unscrew the tripod plate, which is just a huge hassle. The tripod screw covers the unlock mechanism for the bottom plate. So why did I pick the M4-2 specifically? I think if money wasn't an object, I would have bought an M6, but they've gotten incredibly expensive, and the M4-2 I think is a bit of a cheaper M mount alternative. And when I say cheap, I mean like relative to an M6 or an MP. This was by no means a cheap camera, unfortunately. But I picked this one specifically over just the M4 because it has a hot shoe. The M4 does not have a hot shoe, which I think is kind of crazy. I love throwing my contacts flash on this camera. I shoot like that a ton. And so the hot shoe was a must for me. And then other than that, the main downside to this camera over the M6 is the fact that it does not have a light meter. Now, most of the summer, I actually just shot without a light meter. If there was a tricky situation, I would pull out my phone. But during the day, I think light is pretty consistent and easy to guess for me at this point. Later on in the summer, I did get this little light meter that you see on top of the camera, though. This little light meter is made by a company called Kex, and this is their KMQ light meter. It's their smallest hot shoe light meter that they make. It's battery powered, and it's extremely simple. I'll be honest, I previously was somebody who was quite skeptical about Leicas. I always felt like I could get the same image quality with something much more affordable like this because it uses the same lens mount, which means that the images are gonna look the same. But what I didn't realize was just the difference in experience, how much more enjoyable this M4-2 is to use, how much better it feels in the hand, the mechanical feedback that you get from the shutter and the winding mechanism. It's all really enjoyable to use. Is it necessary to take good photos? Absolutely not. But I did put 100+ rolls through this thing this summer, and they were just that much more enjoyable because this camera feels so nice to use. I think my next move is probably to swap out this Voigtlander 2.5 for something else, or get it repaired because it is getting a little wonky. The front element is quite loose, and I wouldn't mind something that goes a little bit shallower as well. I can confidently say this is the most I've ever enjoyed shooting with a camera. I feel so contradictory saying this because I'm somebody who's in the boat of saying gear doesn't matter. You know, you can take a great photo on any camera, and then here I am buying a Leica M4. And I really think it has made a difference for me because I enjoy shooting with this camera so much that I find myself just picking it up more frequently, taking more photos in new environments that I hadn't thought about photographing before, looking at things in a new way because I have a camera on me at all times, purely because it's such a great camera to use and such a nice object as a whole. It makes me want to shoot more, which is kind of wild that a camera can do that. I think you'll be seeing this camera a lot more on the channel in the coming weeks. I have videos from Wildwood, New Jersey, the Outer Banks in North Carolina, and Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, all of which I photographed pretty much entirely with this camera. So look out for those here on the channel coming up. And finally, I want to say a thank you to the sponsor of this channel, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is an incredible all-in-one website building platform that you can use to build your photography portfolio online. I've been using Squarespace for so many years now, and they've made it so incredibly easy to build a website for my photography. My personal website features a ton of different projects that I've shot over the years, both personal and commissioned projects, and I even use it as a platform to sell my photography books and prints. If that sounds interesting to you, you can hit the link in my description for a 14-day free trial of Squarespace, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Willem for 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in a couple days with another video. Peace.
What up, Mr. Baklava? We haven't seen you in a while. It's great to see that smile. Your hair looks wonderful. Let me push this chair up under you. The weather's beautiful. You must have brought the sun with you. You're getting slimmer.